Welcome to this virtual author talk. My name is Mary Weiss. I will be the moderator for this evening. I am a member of the board of the Friends of Westerly Library in Wilcox Park. The Friends, in partnership with the Westerly Library, are pleased to present Sharon Charde tonight, who will be discussing her book, I Am Not a Juvenile Delinquent, How Poetry Changed a Group of At-Risk Young Women, which was just published this past June. I think of Sharon as a local area Westerly writer. She currently lives in northwestern Connecticut, but she previously lived on Block Island for 10 years. She is married and the mother of two. To give you a little sense of who Sharon is, she is a self-described lover of words. She went to my same college, Trinity College in Washington, D.C., a women's Catholic college, which is still alive and thriving. She was an English major. After graduating college, she became a family therapist. Sharon is a published and award-winning poet. There is an incident in her life that she dealt with, and this book she describes as a bridge of shared pain with these young women from her own pain from the death of her son in 1987. Sharon conducts writing workshops. She works with other writers. And this is a book that we are asking Sharon, as we go throughout our time together this evening, to read some of the poems because they are so provocative, so compelling, that we can talk about these young girls, but until you really hear their words, if you haven't had a chance to read them, I think that you will grasp even more the meaning of what Sharon is accomplishing here. She would like their voices to be heard. I'm going to start with a simple question to Sharon, but it has more of a complex answer. The title of your book is rather long, but the first part is, I Am Not a Juvenile Delinquent. And perhaps you can explain for us, Sharon, what the derivation of that title and what it means for you.
That is a very good question. But before, am I muted? Am I okay?
You're fine.
Can you hear me? Okay. How can I get speaker view? I'm just.
Okay. I don't know the answer. Bethany will help you with that.
All right. That's okay. I'll just look at you. So it's a really interesting question, and I'm glad you asked me. While I was at Touchstone, I published a book of poetry called I Am Not a Juvenile Delinquent, of the girls' poems, and I did not choose this title. My original title was The Girls and Me, and the publisher wanted me to come up with a different title. They did not think that was a good title. And I really struggled with trying to find something else, probably because I was too attached to my own title. But this is the one they finally suggested. And I said, but it doesn't relate to me. This is my story as well as theirs. I mean, it's important to put that out, don't you think? And she said, well, my editor said, well, no. She said, this is also your story. You're saying, I don't have a label anymore either at the end of the, I don't have just this label, I should say, the mother of a dead son. And I thought that was a really interesting observation on her part. Several people have said how poetry changed a group of at-risk young women, and I wanted girls, not young women, but that's not politically correct. It changed all of us. But anyway, the title, publishers have a thing about titles. They want people to notice the book in a store and pick it up. And this is a grabby title. So I think that's why it got chosen.
Doesn't the title also explain the various poems with that same name that were written by the girls over time?
Well, Yes, that's why they chose it. And I don't know if you want me to talk about that now, but at the end of every session, I had many different groups through the years that I worked there. Um, we wrote a group poem. I came up with this idea the first time I did it. Uh, I found the poem, I'm Not a Juvenile Delinquent, in a magazine called Teen Voices years ago. And I said, wow, this is a great prompt. Let's try this. I was always looking for material for the girls that was related to them. And oh my gosh, they just took off from that title. And so what they started to do was just throwing out different, I am not, I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this. So I'm madly writing it all down. And so for our first public session, at the end, the girls all stood up together and they would read the poem, that each girl would read a line, one at a time. And then at the end, they would say their names, and you'll hear when I read the poem, they would say their names, and then all together, each one would say her name, and then all together they would say, I am not a juvenile delinquent. I mean, it brought the house down, really. It was just incredible.
I would like you to read the poem, I Am Not a Juvenile Delinquent, that's in your book, but before you do,
Okay.
you use the word prompt. The word prompt, how does that figure into the writing process you had with the girls?
Oh, okay. Well, I studied with Natalie Goldberg in Taos, New Mexico for many years, learning a kind of writing called writing practice, which is, for want of a better way to describe it quickly, it's writing from the gut rather than from the head, the way we learned to do at Trinity. And definitely writing from the head. Not a bad thing, but not always useful when you're trying to write from your heart and your gut. So I want to bring that back to the East Coast because I was lonely for Taos and its energy every time I came home. So I started these writing groups for women, and then moved from that to the girls later. But the way Natalie taught writing practices, she'd just throw out a prompt. She might just say oranges, or birds, or just any random thing. That's not what I do. And then just start. Whatever comes to you, the first thing that comes to you, just put your pen on the page and keep moving. Go where it takes you. Go for the jugular. Use details. Just don't worry about spelling or grammar. Don't worry about making sense. Try not to think. Just keep going. And so I decided to use poems as prompts. I'm a poet, which certainly is one of the reasons. And I think I use poems because they're very rich in imagery. And when you're telling a story or writing a poem, in my opinion, the images and the details need to tell the story. We're not interested in hearing, oh gosh, I had a bad day. My mother was in a bad mood, that just doesn't grab anybody's attention. It's the details, the story of what happened is what grabs people's attention. So I had to work very hard when I began working with the young women of Touchstone, many, if not most of whom were Black and brown, to get materials relevant to their experience. Excuse me, that's my phone ringing. I had lots of material related to, white women and even white young girls, but and I was able to get a lot of wonderful material, and so I would read the poems as prompts. You'll see in the book, those of you who have read it or who haven't read it. I don't say what I use as prompts, but necessarily, but it was to get their, to catch something in their hearts and minds to write about, and it was never any problem. They were always they were always free to write whatever they wanted anyway, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, maybe we could read one of these poems. This is one of the I Am Not a Juvenile Delinquent poems, which is one of several iterations that came out over time. And I think this is where the group just said words out and you wrote them down.
Yes. This is the one we read when we went to Boston for our 2-day trip, which was an amazing experience in both ways. Tough and wonderful. I am not a juvenile delinquent. I am going to tell you the raw truth. I am going to ask, are you ready? Well, here it is. I am happy turned to sad. A whisper that keeps you screaming. A drug that keeps you fiending. I'm the person you pushed aside. I'm a girl who wants to die. I'm a dream turned to nightmare. The sidewalk you spit upon. The cracks you walk over. I'm a fire that's uncontrolled. The gun you want to hold. The story left untold. Some call me nice. Others call me bold. I'm the greatest of all achievements, but a person with a head full of air. I'm the girl next door. I'm a junkie. I'm a soldier ready for war. I'm the person on the corner making money. I put food in my family's mouth to eat. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm smart and pretty. Nobody you need to pity. I am not who you think I am. I'm a wisher, a believer. I like to fantasize. I am a faker, a pretender, a young girl who hasn't gotten anywhere yet, a pair of jeans that just doesn't fit. My mother's on drugs. I am me, but maybe her. Where are you, Daddy? I'm the person who makes you forget what you enjoyed, but remember what you survived. Just look into my eyes. Tell me what you see. Do not label me. I am not a juvenile delinquent.
That's very powerful. And that's when all the girls came in unison at the end. And
Yeah.
said that. Yeah, that must have been an unbelievable moment. Maybe we could step back a little bit because you've used the word touchstone a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who aren't as familiar with your work and the program, maybe you could just put it in context for us where these girls were living, how you came to be with them.
Sure. For a long time, I'd always wanted to work with incarcerated women. And I live in Connecticut, which is a small state with only one women's prison. And it's 2 hours away from me. It's in Niantic, literally diagonally across the state. And so it would have taken me 2 hours to get there and get home. And I did go down at one point and do a writing day there, which I was invited by the librarian and the teacher, the English teacher, and it was an experience I will never forget as long as I live. I mean, when most of us were just crying, crying and writing. So one day I was at Wisdom House, which is a retreat and conference center where I was giving a workshop. And I talked to Sister Joanne. I was talking to Sister Joanne, the program director, and telling her how much this is something I'd always wanted to do. And she said, well, why don't you call Touchstone? They're right across the street. They just opened up, and it's DCF, the Department of Children and Families, funded them, but it's a private institution. And it's the first gender-sensitive facility for girls. They had mixed girls and boys in the detention centers in the state, and they had never separated the sex, or they had Connecticut Junior Republic for the boys, but nothing for the girls, typical. And so she said, just call them up and tell them what you want to do. And I did. And because I'm a person who always rushes in where angels fear to tread, she said, well, come down and next Monday and tell me what you want to do. So I did that, and I brought all my credentials, and she wasn't interested in those at all, really. She just said, tell me how you want to do this. And I said, well, I want to present it to all the girls. And there were about 25 girls in the facility at the time. So we'll do it in 2 groups and then see who wants to do something like this. And it was so easy. And all of a sudden I had what I wanted. I mean, I thought I wanted, but I didn't really, I was shocked, actually. And so the rest is history. I did go down there, and 7 girls wanted to join my first group, and then the first part of the book's divided into 3 sections, and the first part of the book is the first year, my first year there, detailing everything I did by the seat of my pants. But it was a facility for girls who had been they were on parole, probation. Some of them had committed, pretty serious crimes. And the judge had sent them there rather than to jail, because the jail took 14-year-old girls, believe it or not. And they actually had programs. They had a school there, and they had clinical support. And as the girls told me, when they went to Long Lane, which was a juvenile detention center in Connecticut, which is now closed, all they did was sit and stare at the wall. And at least at Touchstone, they had programs. They had DBT therapy. They took them out, dirt bike riding, and various other activities, only if their behavior was good. And
Right.
most of them had, 10 months to 2 years there. So.
Well, there was also a connection you had in the same area with a private boarding school, the Hotchkiss
That's
School,
right.
which seems to be on the other side of this spectrum. Did these 2 groups of young girls ever come together, meet, interact, or did you operate separately between them?
Oh, no. What happened was, and I think this is such a wonderful part of the story. I just love this part. And well, I love it all, but I especially love this part. One day, I think it was a couple of years into my doing this program, I met a teacher. I knew a lot of people at Hotchkiss because my 2 sons had gone there after 8 years of public education. And I'd been also involved in helping them develop their human development program. And I knew a lot of, it's 5 minutes from my house. So a lot of the people were neighbors. And anyway, so Sarah said, well, what are you doing, Sharon, these days? And I told her, and she said, oh, you've got to come to Hotchkiss, bring the girls and give a reading. And I'm like, what? That's 2 different worlds. And she said, well, that's just why you have to do it. That's the reason. And she said, we'll put you in the Black Box Theater and you have to do it. You have to come. So we organized a way to make that happen. It was always a struggle from Touchstone, getting the van, getting the staff, getting the girls' permission and so forth. But anyway, the teachers brought their class. I think it was the English teachers brought their classes, and then it was open to other kids. The Black Box Theater was packed, and it was absolutely unbelievable. It was like 2 worlds just meshing in the most wonderful way, and very different, and the Hotchkiss kids were stunned. I mean, this was like, they had never heard anything like this before. So we had a talk back afterwards, and it was very rich and fascinating. And so Nancy Gaynor, the head of the Human Development Program, came up to me and said afterwards, Sharon, we need you. We have to keep this going somehow. And I said, wow, let's make it happen. And so we did.
So you continued to work with both sets of girls? They were interacting with each other?
For 11 years. because I did continue after the book is over with the Hotchkiss girls and the Touchstone girls. Touchstone would come up I think we started doing it every 2 weeks. And the staff, two staff, I think they had to have two staff come up in a van to Hotchkiss, and we would meet in a classroom, one of the English classrooms, and Nancy ordered pizza, and I would bring in Oreos or chocolate chip cookies, and we'd all have pizza together, and then we would write, and it was a 2-hour session. And the Hotchkiss girls, I can't tell you, I have a whole folder full of testimonials. They're like saying, this is the best thing in the whole 4 years I've been here. This is a way to take off my mask. I love this time so much. I can relax, and these stories are amazing. And you know what? Just because you live in a mansion with green shutters or an apartment on Park Avenue doesn't mean you don't have terrible problems and painful family situations as well. So there was a tremendous amount of just resonance, and they're teenage girls, you know.
Right.
They wore a lot of, well, actually they didn't wear a lot of the same clothes, but and so it was, and the Hotchkiss girls still stay in touch with me. I just got a note from one the other day. Oh my God, that was such a wonderful program, and I just bought the book. And so I don't know if I'm answering, tell me if I'm not answering.
No, I think you've explained that dynamic quite well, because as I understand these poetry sessions, there really was not like a formal poetry writing class. This was something that all the girls could, I think you used the phrase, speak to truth, be themselves. And I think it might be appropriate now to ask you to read another poem for us. This is by a young lady named Tiffany. And maybe you could give us a little background on who Tiffany is, and then read her poem, My Heart is Like an Oven.
Tiffany, I'm so proud of Tiffany. She actually graduated from college, and she has a little girl, Harlan, and she works as a teaching assistant in a light and life skills in a high school in Hartford. And I can't remember why she came to Touchstone. She was so angry. And it turned out that she experienced a sexual abuse by her uncle. And one of the poems in here, I think it's not this one, it's another one. She was able to write that poem and read it at one of our public sessions, and which was an incredible experience for her to just release that into the world. She was very bright and capable young woman, but really she hated being there. Well, nobody really liked being there very much. And she was not very cooperative, but she loved the poetry, and everything she wrote came out like a poem. I barely had to do any editing of her stuff. She wrote in stanzas, and she had great imagery. So here's her, yes, I didn't talk about metaphors or line breaks. I didn't do any of that. They weren't interested in that. They just wanted to write. So my heart is like an oven. My heart is like an oven full of different kinds of foods, baking and burning. Now there's smoke coming from the stove. My issues and problems are the food. They're burning because they're hurting me. The smoke is the pounding of my heart, full and ready to explode. I just don't want the oven to burn the house down. But slowly the fire is moving from room to room, destroying gobs of furniture at a time. How can I turn off the oven, extinguish the fire? I must, before the children burn upstairs in their helpless sleep, not knowing about the food that was cooking. And it's interesting, she doesn't solve the problem. And obviously the problem wasn't solved for her in her life.
She was the young lady who was raped at 5 by her uncle, was she?
No, that's Artrice. Oh
That's good.
no, no, she wasn't raped that by her uncle, which she was raped by a drug dealer. Her mother sold her to a drug dealer. Her 5-year-old daughter sold her to a drug dealer for drugs and pinned her down while this bastard animal, unspeakable human being did this to her 5-year-old daughter.
Hmm.
It's been really hard for me to before I met the girls, and then I worked in a settlement house in Hartford too with women who had just come out of prison and were trying to find their next step, to comprehend how people can do things like this, but especially the women in the Hartford program said, Sharon, when you're on drugs, you don't care. You don't care. You give up your children, you give up your money, you give up your house. You just want the drugs. And so I got an incredible education over these years. And of course I had a lot of clinical knowledge about drugs, but this was gut experience.
Yes. Well, there's another poem that I think would be appropriate to read now too by a young lady named Teray called Smooth Pain. And maybe you could give us a little background on Teray's personal story.
Teray is amazing. For any of you who have read my blogs, I've written a couple of blog posts about her. She is a powerful young woman. Well, she's now 30, I think she's 35 now. She wrote this poem. She wrote extraordinary poems. She was so smart that she was smarter than most of the staff at Touchstone. She outsmarted everybody. She got away with all kinds of stuff. And she hated being there, but she loved the poetry group that I had, and was totally cooperative in that. And she and I, it was a wonderful experience for us both, and it was very good for the group because she was so committed to it. I submitted some of her work to the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival for young. They have a Fresh Voices competition for high school girls, or not girls, just anybody in high school. And I think it was 2002, and she won.
Wow.
And she won. The book tells the story, and she was totally blasé about it. But I was over the moon, and then trying to figure out how are we ever going to make this work. And the book tells, there's a chapter on her. The book tells the story. But this is one of the poems I submitted, and one of the poems she read that night. And she has an incredibly melodious voice. She sounds like, who's the jazz singer? Is it Bessie Smith? Somebody compared her to this blues singer, and she and her grandmother, grandfather, and her brother, I think were they were almost the only people of color reading at this fabulous Sunken Garden in Farmington, Connecticut, to an audience of maybe 1,500, mostly white, privileged people. So I achieved one of my goals I achieved that night. I got these voices out in the world, to the white world. Smooth Pain.
Poem. Yes.
Oh, yes. Smooth Pain. I'm sorry, I've talked too much.
That's all right.
Smooth pain. My pain you can't touch. It's untouchable. Even I can't touch it. I can only feel it. It's a smooth feeling, smoother than a baby's ass, smoother than Teddy Pendergast. Yes, but pain. Pain when I walk, pain when I move. Just smooth pain. Sometimes people say pain will heal. Mine hasn't yet. It feels like the pain my ancestors went through. It feels like the pain of a starving child in the middle of the street. The pain of an old man robbed of everything, even his socks. The pain of the world. More pain, less pain, smooth pain.
They'd always take my breath away, Sharon. They're just so compelling, so genuine, so authentic. Reading these poems, I think, I hope the group enjoys hearing them in the sense that it gives us a sense of who these young girls were. And there's an interesting letter I think you wanted to share to us. I don't think it's in the book, from a young poet named Molly.
Oh no, it's not in the book. It's a lot. She's one of the 5 girls I featured in the book, and I mean, I wrote about a lot of other girls, but I did more, put more focus on 5, who were Teray, Shamir, Jenny, Molly, and Miranda. And Molly was one of the girls who was there at the end of my time there. And she had a very, very serious drug problem and a serious crime, and was a skinny addict when she arrived, looking like she was close to dying. She was a mess. And bright, amazing young woman, a little untypical of our population. Her mother was a Montessori teacher, actually. And she tells me in this is a letter she wrote to me after she read the book. So she's, gosh, I don't know, she must be moving towards 30. No, she must be late 20s, I guess. And I'm not going to read the whole book, but she's so struck by how her life has changed. She is clean for 2 years. Thank God. Keep it. Well, not thank God, thank Maui, thank Narayan. So she said, "You gave us a chance to freely express ourselves without fear of censorship or being judged or shot down. Those groups were a safe haven for us there, and the outside readings were so empowering. It gave us a chance to have our voices heard. And it showed us that people cared about what we said and who we were." Oh, I'm gonna cry. "When so many of us had been constantly pushed aside or abandoned, told we were nothing, that we would always be nothing and would never amount to anything. Having that opportunity to be put in the spotlight and have our secrets and hurts validated and respected was incredibly empowering and made such a difference. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you that. And thank you for all you did for me and the many girls who came through those doors." So it's happening tonight. Their voices, her voice, if you want me to read her poem.
Oh, please. It's called These Are My Friends.
Yeah. We had I started a poetry festival with a contest every summer, and I would invite my women poetry friends to come, and each woman would be paired with a girl and they would read together, and then we had a contest. I kept coming up with these things, and of course it was so much work, but it was so worth it. And then we had a contest, and there were judges, and the girls, for the girls, and we'd have first, second, and third prize. And this won first prize for sure. These Are My Friends by Molly. This is my friend, the baby that has a baby, both junkies, and says, "I love you," in between pushing opium grains down its throat. This is my friend, the girl who cuts her arms to ribbons just to get sewn back together until she resembles nothing more than a cruelly made rag doll. This is my friend, the scared little boy who runs from homeward fists, drinks away his bruises, jumps into a car to party, only to drive neatly into a splintered tree. This is my friend, the junkie who discovers he has AIDS, learns the only two he loves he's passed it on to. And when the guilt overwhelms, he overdoses on the one thing that brought him comfort. This is my friend, the child who has no real family, so joins a stand-in, loses everything that is beautiful to him the day he dies in a war of colors. This is my friend, the girl who never came to school because she's walked the streets turning tricks, hoping her sister never sees the things she's seen. This is my friend, the boy who lets his coke rule his life until the day he takes charge by silently turning the trigger against his temple. This is my friend, the murderer who sits in jail for killing the man who stole the soul from his 5-year-old daughter. Lost and scared, my friends huddle in safety. Most won't make it to 21. Some will never see 18. And for 19 of them, it's already too late. The rest stay strong, forcing themselves to bear whatever life throws. These are my friends. The audience rose to its feet, clapping and crying. So
It's almost, we have to pause for a moment there, Sharon.
yeah, you have to breathe.
Yeah, you do, deep breaths. I did want to share with the group the cover to Sharon's book. I think the photographer is actually here this evening. And the young lady in the lower left, Shaniqua, do I have that correctly?
Shaniqua. Shaniqua.
Shaniqua, I apologize. I tried to practice too. And she has written the last poem that I'm going to ask Sharon to read tonight. Hearing your own voice read these is just so compelling. And Sharon, this young lady wrote a poem, What I Want My Words to Do to You.
Well, let me find it here. Yes.
181.
Yeah. This was, those of you who have knowledge of private schools know that there's a thing they have called chapel, at least Hotchkiss has it. I don't know what the Millbrook equivalent is, but the whole school has to show up. I don't know if it's twice a week or it's frequently, and they're supposed to have some kind of inspirational presentation. And we were invited to give the chapel talk at Hotchkiss, and that was 600 people. Everyone was required to come, or 600 plus. And so my girls, we arrived, and they're up on the stage in this gorgeous Elfers Hall. And Shaniqua started out by reading this poem, which was perfect. What I want my words to do to you. When I speak, I want you to listen. Every sentence, every breath, every pause. I want this to sink inside of you. I want you to know what type of shit I go through, what kind of life I live, the battle I fight from day to day. When I speak, I don't want your sympathy or your pity or your everything was going to be all right. Why cry if this ain't your life? Just listen, marinate in what I say. When I speak, I want to be visible, undressed, alive, living in your spirit, floating in your bones. I speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but it. Don't say a word. Hush your mouth. I'm not finished yet. Hear me out this one time. Don't shut me down. I tell you this is visible, indelible. Don't be in denial. Open your mind, open your heart, open your wings. Because this is what I want my words, my verse to do to you. My words are powerful and strong. Maybe that's why I sometimes feel so alone. I don't think before I speak, I just say what's on my mind. That's freedom of speech, right? If I ain't doing no crime and you didn't like what I just spit out, don't blame me if you can't take the truth. It may hurt a lot, but trust me, it'll be better for you. My words are my protectors, my shield for life. Without my words, I'd probably go out of my mind. My words make me feel whole. My words are like glitter and gold. My words to you may be nothing but lip, but the words I state, the words I form into a sentence that says something of value to me. My words, my words, my words. The huge hall was completely silent when they finished. The Hotchkiss girls said even the football players had been transfixed.
Sharon, I think this might be a good time to see if Bethany has any questions from our audience.
Nothing in the chat.
Well, then I guess we'll open up the floor, Bethany, and see if people have questions for or comments for Sharon.
Love to hear what you all think.
This is Peg. Sharon, I found the book incredibly compelling, and I felt every moment of every word you wrote and the girls wrote. And I had a question about the writing process with the girls. And in some instances, you talked about editing, and some of the girls just free-flowing, you didn't have to do anything. And I'm not talking about editing the, fucking shit and all that out of it. I'm talking about editing it so that their words were presented to them sort of in a poetic form. I don't know how that worked, or I know you typed them all up, but could you speak about that a little bit?
That's a great question, and I'm glad to be able to explain that. It didn't happen right away that I gave the girls notebooks, but at some point during I think the end of the first session, I thought, I'm going to take these these things they've written home and type them up so they can see their work. So they would give me the notebooks or a script, really a scribbled on page torn out of a notebook. And for Tiffany wrote her poems pretty much, she knew how to write a poem with stanzas and so forth. But the rest of them, and I think Molly did too, but what I would do, so there were just a lot of words on a page, or I would take them, I would type them up, and I would left justify them and do line breaks, where I felt the line needed to be, was appropriate to do a line break. And that really ended up being the way I taught poetry, because they would look at that and they would say, oh, this is a poem. I mean, they would see it and transformed into another form. And, but if I tried to change a word, even, like gonna, and I mean, I wouldn't do that actually, because gonna is right, not going to. I mean, it was one of my things I said to Touchstone. They weren't allowed to use ghetto language or swear or anything. I said, they have to be free to use any language at all in their work. Otherwise, I'm not going to do this program, because you can't censor yourself. It's just not going to work. So they were fine with that. They were okay with that. And we did talk a lot about, for instance, using the word fuck, which is a favorite of theirs. I said, if you use it so much, it loses its power. Let's, think about maybe cutting it out a few times and see if that works. But mostly I didn't do stuff like that. I just typed it up, and I would write a note often write a note, always praising. I mean, when all of us know who have facilitated any kind of writing program with this kind of writing, you only say positive things about the writing. It's not a time for any kind of critique or feedback other than something positive. So I would focus on the strengths and the language. They were all drama queens. So they got, they got the drama of the performance of poetry and reading it. Some of the girls were the best rappers. Teray could rap like nobody's business. And they loved, and then I would get them these plastic folders and they would and I would make a title page for them, and then they put their poems in there. And a lot of the girls still write to me and say, do you still have my poems, Sharon? Would you send them to me? And which of course I do have them. I have them all on my computer and my file cabinet. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's pretty much what I did.
We have a couple questions. Mary Blanchett said, would you be able to let us know what the blog is?
Oh, it's it gets sent out to my MailChimp list, and if you're not on it, you wouldn't get it, but they're all on my website, which is SharonCharde.com. And there's a tab or whatever you call it at the top that says blog. And so I've been doing them every couple of weeks since March, because the publisher wanted me to do a blog, and I had never done one before, and I wasn't really interested in doing one. But then I started, especially with COVID and all the stuff that was happening. I was out in Wyoming actually at the time at a writing residency, and I decided I love them. It's like writing essays. It's been a really good outlet for me, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. So welcome, send me your email and I'll put you on the list, or you can just look at my website. Thanks for asking.
And Linda wants to know, have any of the girls continued to write?
I sent all the girls, when I got the book, when I got a box of books, I sent everybody a book, and I sent them all a journal with the book. And a few of them have written back saying that they're using, Molly actually said she was using her journal for she's in the 12-step program, and she was using it for the 4th step 4. Yeah. She said, do you know what that is? I sure do. So, I really don't know the answer to that, but I think the answer is probably maybe some of them are, but I think most of them are so caught up in their difficult lives. I've talked to you about the successful ones, but some of the girls on this cover are, the two next to me, their lives are not so good right now. They have a lot of children. A lot of them have had 3 and 4 children, and what I was able to create for them, which I didn't really realize at the time, was a place where they could go, and they had a place to write, and I provided them with the pen and the paper and the time to do it. And, to make that time in your life, especially even as those of us who are writers know, is really hard. So I really don't know the answer to that question, but they tell me they are. Shamir has said she is. Molly's working all the times. They have jobs, they have lives. They don't have the luxury of putting pen to paper the way I was able to create that time and space for them, I think. And I encourage them to write when I'm connecting with them, but intentions may be there, but the actual execution of the intentions is probably not. So, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Anybody else?
Jane has. Shane is unmuted. He's muted.
Was somebody else going to talk? Can you hear me? Can you hear me or not?
Yes.
Bethany? Okay. I enjoyed listening to everything. This was really so interesting. And it's just such a great work that you've been doing with them, and just sounds so rewarding. Just really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for showing up.
I have a question. Sharon, how did you select the kids for the group? And how did you publicize in the facility that the group was available? Or was it?
Oh, well, the girls, it was tricky. It was a very tricky situation. The first group was self-selected out of the whole community because I gave a presentation. But then after that, you know, girls would leave. I mean, this was a constantly changing group, and they got the girls who were in the group got very possessive about the group, and they said, "This is our group." But I said, "People are leaving. We can't just have a group with 3 people." And they said, "Well, you can't have this person or that." I mean, it was because trust and safety were of utmost importance. And these are young women who don't trust many people and don't feel safe. So it was very tricky. With the help of, they would sometimes ask their friends. Like Tiffany was brought in by Tiffany, and I forget who came in with her. And then they'd forget, you know, they'd say, "We don't want anybody," but then new girls would come in anyway. And the staff would also have some ideas about who would be a good candidate. But it was mostly the girls, who, as I recall, who suggested it. And it was kind of known in the culture of Touchstone. They called it creative writing. And as I became more and more, as I did more and more outside events, it became very well known. It was a privilege. They never decided whether it was a privilege or a clinical thing to be part of it. I mean, it was very useful as a clinical tool, even though it wasn't therapy at all. The clinicians would sometimes say to me, "How did you get that out of them?" You know, so it was a little bit of everything, but sometimes that girl would come up to a staff member and say, I want to be in creative writing. And they had to be on a level, a certain level of behavior, and they had to be on a higher level to go out. And that was always shifting and changing. But so it was a variety of different ways.
You know, you said you didn't teach them metaphors, but their work is very metaphorical.
I know, it is.
Isn't it? Yeah. So maybe that's just a natural when you want to express yourself and you're looking at your own feelings, you sort of naturally turn to metaphors and similes and likes and comparing and contrasting.
Well, I think they were natural poets. I mean, you know, some of them would say writing isn't my hobby. Not the girls in the group, they called it a hobby. But I mean, the girls, they were natural poet and dancers and movers. I mean, they had a voice. I mean, especially the girls of color. I mean, you know, we don't grasp that as well as I wish we would, because they are poetry, you know, in so many ways. They get it. And music, they love music, and there was a lot of melody also, and rhythm, and you know, feeling in their work that came from their listening to a lot of terrific music. So that was part of it. But they were better poets than a lot of, you know, white. Lisa was in my poetry class at my seminar in college. God, they were better poets than a lot of us were back then. We didn't have any life experience to write about. I mean, look what they had to write about.
Oh, we did. But you know what I think is important? You know what I think is important? This is not, I mean, they've been through terrible situations, but I think it's important to recognize, and you do, you definitely do, but I think it's important to recognize that these terrible emotional experiences and abusive experiences are universal. They cut across class line.
Yes.
And you can just tell by all these prep schools and colleges that are having so much trouble with sexual abuse, you know, histories of it and everything. I mean, I think that's one thing that I think is important, that they're probably fortunate, and this may be a byproduct of class, they're fortunate that they can address in their work with you their issues. And maybe the rest of us who have really tough issues in our life are more bound by them because we can't reach that level of expression and recognition of them. I don't know.
Well, that's what my women's writing groups are all about. They're the same thing, and people get the guts to write about it there. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Lisa. Yeah.
Peg, you had a question?
Yeah, Sharon, I wanted to go back to what you said in the beginning of our talk, your talk, regarding the title, and that the book was about you as much as it was about the girls. And I think that, to me, that was a very important piece of the story. How you came to recognize that you needed them kind of as much as they needed you to get you through the tragedy of your son's loss. And that whole theme running through it, and your understanding of yourself or lack of understanding during certain parts, whether you stuck with it or didn't, for me was a very interesting part of the story. And I don't know if you want to speak about that at all for a minute or two.
Well, yeah, I think each interview, each virtual interview I've given has kind of focused on different aspects of the book, and we focused more on the girls today. But yes, it's very much a story of my evolution of coming to this work with, you know, really down on my knees and with grief, and not having found any way to let go of it. I did not come to it with the idea that it would help me. That's a mistaken idea that a lot of people have. I just came to it because I was seeking more meaning in my life. And somehow this was something, you know, Joe Biden said in his wonderful speech, what do you do when you're experiencing the black hole of grief? I mean, you experience it, but then you know your loved one is still with you, and you believe that and embrace that, and then you find purpose. And I didn't know that's what I was doing. I mean, I was already practicing as a family therapist, and I was doing these other running groups, but this felt like much more of a purpose. And it was intuitive on my part. I wasn't like saying, oh, I have to find a purpose, you know. But when I look back on it, as those of us who write memoirs do, you know, that's what I see. And as I've said before, what happened to me was I fell in love with these girls. I mean, I think you can tell from listening to me how much I love them, and the love became so great that the pain became smaller. And I learned through my Buddhist practice, which is also a part of the book, about what letting go really means, which I hadn't really understood. And I was able to understand that in order to let my son go, I mean, we know about letting our living children go, but I needed to let my dead son go too. I was clinging to him in a way that was perhaps impeding his life in the other world where he is. And I was able to get that through this time somehow. And then I had something else to fill my life, and that felt, it was just so much love. And as I say, they saved me. You know. I'm incredibly grateful to them for letting me into their lives and giving me the opportunity to be present to them.
Bethany, I don't know if there are any more questions, but I personally feel as if you've let us into this world, and we appreciate and thank you for that, Sharon. It's been a wonderful evening. It's always a pleasure to have an author with us, particularly one with such a story that you've told us. And I thank the people who've attended tonight for your attention and interest in this work. I would like you to know that the book is available for purchase if you don't have it yet from the Savoy Bookstore. And if you just let them know, if you buy online, there's a little comment section. And if you just put in there WLWP for Westerly Library, Wilcox Park, and then indicate you'd like a signed and personalized copy, they will make sure that that happens with book plates. And part of the proceeds will go to the benefit of the Westerly Library. So I thank you if you're able to do that and buy the book. And thank you again, Sharon, for a wonderful past hour.
Oh, you're more than welcome,
you.
Mary, and I'm so grateful to you for allowing this opportunity for the girls' voices to be heard in the world. It means a lot to them. I know it would mean a lot to them if they were if they were listening, but I'll let them know. I'll send them the link.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I think that
Thank you,
concludes our
Sharon.
evening.